All right, Wednesday, September 19th. I can't believe that we met Monday, September 17th, and it didn't even occur to me that it was Constitution Day. Of all your professors that should have mentioned Constitution Day, it seems like it should have been me. Anyway, so we got this unemployment file that we're going to download. So our whole goal today is to work on, to see the three main kinds of loops in VBA. And so this unemployment data is really the backdrop to be able to work on this. And as a general rule, as we're working on examples, I've got one of two approaches that I can take. Approach number one is that I could say, you know what, let's just look at exactly the syntax that I'm trying to teach you and do it in an abstract way. And we can actually cover more ground that way, but it's really, really boring. So the other approach is to say, well, let's take and actually build an example that's kind of a complete example here in class, something that's more interesting that you can see the power of it. We're spending time on things that are kind of supporting structure around what we're trying to teach. We don't get to have as much time focused just on the syntax. So I will spend some of days doing either one of those two approaches. Today we're going to do kind of a fuller example. The book does a great job covering the details of loops, so we'll introduce that in the context of this example that we're going to build here. There's a question. Oh, about parallels. How many of you are using parallels? Mac and parallels. Have you done the assignment that's due tonight yet? Have you? Just these two? Anyone else? A couple of you. Have you done it? Have you done the one for tonight? No? No? Why would you do it? It's not due till tonight. So, okay, a little side note for parallels things. The way parallel sets up by default is it's going to have a UNC path. You probably don't know what that means. So it will give you something like this, / when / something, is the path where you're going. It turns out that VBA is utterly confused by a UNC path. For VBA, it's got to start with like Z:, or C:, / or something. So when you open up your files on, when you're using parallels, the default is going to be this UNC path. So you need to find your Z drive, navigate to wherever you've downloaded it through the Z drive, and open the file from the Z drive so that it opens and it thinks, oh, I'm on the Z drive. Did you follow that? Did you get that okay? Nope, that's every assignment from now on. The first assignment didn't even look at VBA, and so the fact that VBA will, but for the rest of the assignments it's going to be an issue. Yeah, so in fact, John, you're on parallels? Will you? Oh, okay. Could you just see if you can get to the instructions on the assignment? Doing what I just told you, see if you can get to the instructions?
Yeah, I actually hit open the assignment before, and so I got out.
Oh, and you can get to the assignment instructions, okay? Okay, good.
If I go to the Z drive.
So the issue that we saw with you is probably something in addition to that. Okay, great. You figured it out by yourself? Did I put a little?
You told me the path to start with.
Oh, I did. I did put a comment in there that showed you automatically. Oh, I guess I didn't have to say that. So anyway, congratulations. All right. So what do we have here? Oh, I'm going to enable editing. I'm going to enable macros. All right, so what we have here is just a list of counties. And this is the FIPS. It's the Federal Information, I forgot what the FIP stands for. Anyway, it's a standard code. It's a 5-digit code that identifies every county in a bunch. There's 3,000 counties. And so here they are listed. I guess we even have some in Puerto Rico. I guess they're part of the United States of America, sort of. Okay. So there are two modules here. Let me just introduce you to the modules that are kind of already built into this workbook. One of them is called Create Web Query. And this code should look a little bit familiar to you because this is the example that we did in class where we recorded ourselves modifying a web query. It generated something very much like this. But what I've done is I've just said, let's just write a couple of procedures here that we can use to very easily generate a web query. And so everything in this module called mod web query over here is just some procedures for building web queries on the fly without having to record yourself doing it. It's just code that you can do that says make a web query here. I then use that in kind of enough to get started here. So we didn't have to write this code, we're started here. So the idea here is that you will pick which one of these counties you want to get the data from, and then we will run the web query that will pull that data in. And so this is, stuff that we've covered before, so we're not building this from scratch. But I do want to show you something that's new that we haven't seen so far. So every time we've seen a sub-procedure so far or a macro, you have the macro name, and then it ends with these parentheses, opening and closing parentheses. And I told you later in life, I would tell you what those are for. Well, today is the day. So it turns out that when you just have a macro has to be able to run just by itself. And so you really can't have anything inside those parentheses for a macro. But if you write your own sub-procedure, you can say, listen, I want this sub-procedure to behave differently each time I call it. And how different is it going to be? How is it going to know how to behave differently? And the answer is, I can send some information to that sub-procedure each time I call it. And that's what those parentheses are for. So if we look down here at this sub-procedure called import county data, I have put inside these parentheses the definition of variable. That's what that is. Now, normally when we make a variable, what do? We say dim, and then we put the name of the variable as some data type. So up here inside these parentheses, I can say, hey, here's a special variable. In fact, the only thing I can put inside the parentheses is a definition of a variable. And so I don't even need the keyword dim. It knows. This is a variable declaration. And so it says fips as string. So I got a variable now named fips. But when I declare a variable inside these parentheses, it will get its value when I call the procedure. So here I'm going to call import county data. So here's the name of the procedure. It's going to call this. It's going to call the sub-procedure here. But then right after it, I put the value that I want to set that variable to initially. So I've got a variable called fips. When I call this, it says, oh, great, we're calling this. Oh, there's a parameter. Good news. I'm sending it a value. And so even though there's no line in here that says fips equals, fips is going to take on the value that I pass to it. So I am passing an argument to this parameter. It's called a parameter because it's a special variable that's declared on the same line with where the sub-procedure is created, but it really is just a variable that gets its value in a special way. We okay with this? If I were to just come here and say print, or debug.print, fips, it should just print the value that's there. So I'm going to put stop right here, which will just suspend the code from running. And then I'll run this call. So I'm going to run get data. It's going to pass this value in. It'll be accepted into the variable fips. I'm going to print fips, and that should then show that value. So I'm going to run get data, and it should stop at that point. Get data. Okay, and so we have printed the value of that, and you can see that it has accepted the value from where I called the procedure. Okay, there's a question here.
I missed something, but why do it this way as opposed to saying, doing it?
The question is, I see that you can declare a variable there, but why would you do that? Why not just declare it with a dim? And the answer is, it's so that I can call, so from outside of this sub-procedure, I can have various different calls. Ultimately, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a loop that will call this sub-procedure multiple times, and it will send a different fips to it each time. So this is a particular county. It's an identifier for a county from our county list, and I want to call it again, sending a different county, and it's going to get the information for each of those counties differently. So yeah, I could declare it in here and have other code here that tries to figure out which one it is, like maybe looking at the active cell or something. There are other ways that I could do it, but this is a really common and a really handy way to do it. Other questions? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. By the way, I'm not sure if I've ever told you this, but anytime you have this yellow line, usually happens because you've got an error. And it says, this is the line I tried to execute, and I just couldn't for some reason. If you realize you've got a problem and you correct it, you may want to hit the stop button here, which will stop your code from running. Make whatever correction you want to make. I'm going to get rid of those 2 lines, and then I can run it again. So what this should do, it's going to declare a variable, an object variable. I'm going to say set that object variable equal to, I'm adding a worksheet. Who can tell me where this worksheet's going to go? Say it a little bit louder. At the very end. I'm saying it's going after a particular worksheet. What worksheet is it? Well, look at this workbook's collection of worksheets, and then I'm giving it a number here. What number am I giving it? However many there are. So if there are 5 worksheets, I'm telling it to go after the 5th worksheet in the collection. So it'll go right at the very end. And it will bind the object variable S. And so now S will be another way for me to reference that newly created worksheet. And so now when I say create web query, I have to tell it where I want the web query to go. I give it a cell that I want the web query to start in. And so that newly created sheet, range A1, I give it a URL that I want to get the data from. And you can see that it's coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I'm integrating the FIPS code into the URL. And this is actually coming from the year 2008. I'd like to bump that down to like 2006. So in this data, we can get a look at the recession that happens in 2008. What was happening in 2006 will come along for a few more years, and it will end with the most recent data that it has available. We're telling to bring in all the tables. False means we're not going to save the web query. So once it gets the data, it will dump off the web query. And I think this last one is whether the data should come in formatted or not. So it's just going to come in. Yeah, I don't remember what that is. We can go look at the instructions. That's plain text, the last one. So plain text is true. Okay, I was thinking of it backwards. I was surprised why it was true. So it'll come in as plain text without trying to bring font and color and such. Okay, so it should create a sheet. It should bring in some data from a web page using a web query and then not save the web query so it won't be refreshable. And that's what that should do. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And it's going to bring in county 20,063. Which, by the way, is one of my favorite counties in the whole United States. Looks like that ran. Oh, no, it's still running. Question, hold on a second. There it is. Why is this one of my favorite counties? Yeah, it's the county I was named after. Not directly. Great-great-great-grandma Phelps was crossing the plains. They stopped in Gov County, Kansas. And later they had a son, and they named him Gov. At first I thought he was born in Gov County, but he wasn't. I actually looked up his date, doing some family history research. Then I thought maybe he was conceived in Gov County. Nope, timing's not right for that either, but they just liked the name. There was a question somewhere here, yeah? So create web query is just a sub-procedure that I created earlier. It's in this other module here called mob web query. And if you open that up, it's just here. Create web query is just a sub-procedure. So yeah, look, it's the same thing here. This sub-procedure is expecting a whole bunch of different values. And yeah, so here we're calling that sub-procedure and we're not putting those parentheses. Whether you put parentheses around the set of arguments you send to parameters is one of the mistakes they made when they were making the language VBA. In most languages, you always put parentheses around the argument list. In VBA, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And shall I tell you? No, I'm not going to tell you today. You're just going to accept that. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. We'll spend some time on a later session helping you understand how you can know when to put the parentheses, when to not put the parentheses. So for now, just say don't put parentheses around the argument list until I tell you otherwise. Okay. So that has brought in the data, and here's the data. So yeah, we can start. This is actually monthly data. So it has the size of the labor force for that month, how many were employed, how many were unemployed. I guess these must be in thousands. And then the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is really the parts that I'm going to be interested in working with today. What I would like to do is I would like to be able to say, I want to be able to bring in not just one at a time, but I want to be able to specify some way to say, I want to bring in these counties. And I want it to then, to bring the data in, I would like it to kind of aggregate that data so that I can charts with it. And so we have several to be able to use loops here in this example. So the first one that we're going to do is right here. This data comes in and it brings in some data that we don't need. So I would like to get rid of all this data down to where my data starts, line 19. So year, period, labor force, all that. But first, I would like to be able to get this the name of this county, and I want to put that on the tab. I want to name the tab to be that. So I want to go find that particular one. It turns out it's always going to come back into row 9, column 1. That's good. Let's make it a little bit easier. So otherwise, we have to kind of search for the cell that starts with area, colon, but this will be a little easier for us. So let's go ahead and do that to start with. So I'm going to, back in my import county data sub-procedure, let's go ahead and create a variable called county name. Or I'll just call it CO name as a string. Wow. S-R-I-N-G. And dim. I didn't type a single thing right in that whole expression. Okay. Now, after I have brought the data in, I'm ready to go ahead and get what that name is going to be. So, let me start by just reading what's in A9 into the variable. Now, I've got to get down to where it's just, I don't want the area, I just want just the name of the county, comma, the name of the state, or the state identifier. So let me just go ahead and initially read that in. So, CO name equals, S is my worksheet, range, it's always going to be range A9, dot value. I'm going to go ahead and put a stop there, and I'm going to run this code to that point. The stop just takes us into break mode. When I'm in break mode, all my variables are still declared in memory. Their values are there. I can access them. It's kind of a handy place to kind of poke around with things and see how I want to develop the code. So I will come back. By the way, I cannot just run this procedure now because it's expecting to have a value sent to it. So if I just try to run this one, I'll just have my insertion point here on my import county data. I'll push play, and it's going to go, I don't know what you want to run, but you can't run this one. So it gives me a list of the things I can run. And so get data is the one. So I can either go up and run it on that one or just go ahead and run it from here. That should bring the data in, get another sheet, we'll bring that data in. And because it takes a few seconds to get the data, that's why I want to go into break mode. So I can kind of play around with it here without having to go and get that data again. Okay, so I'm just going to come to the immediate window. And is it easier if I move this immediate window to the top? Let me do that. I think it's better up there. There we go. Okay, so I just want to look at what my county name is right now. Just as we expected, it's what's sitting there inside that particular cell. Now, how am I going to get down to just the information that I want? Well, this thing that I'm about to show you, we're going to have a whole day where we talk about string manipulation functions. But let me just show you a couple that we need to get going here. I'm going to split. So there is a function called split. I'm going to give it the name of the string that I want to split. I'm going to give it the character I want to split on a colon. This now is going to return to me as many strings. It's going to return to me a set of strings in a construct called an array. We have 2 days that we'll spend on arrays, and so today, just a superficial understanding. In this case, it's going to say, oh, there's a colon, and so it's going to split this thing into 2 different strings. What's before the colon and what's after the colon? What if there was 2 colons in it? I'd get 3 strings. It would split, it would say, oh, that's a delimiter, and it's going to split that one string into the number of strings that it finds the delimiter plus 1. Whatever's before it, whatever's in the middle, whatever comes after it. So now I have to tell it which of those I want. I do that in parentheses right after. And so if I put a 1 here, it will bring back the number 1 string. It turns out we start counting at 0 for this. And so the first one is number 0, the number 1 is going to be that second one. So that should give me just the Gov County, Kansas part. But you'll notice it starts with what? It's a bunch of spaces in here. Fortunately, there's a function that says just get rid of all leading and trailing spaces. It's called trim. So I'll just wrap trim right around that whole thing. Trim, opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis. It's the Russian spelling. Let me go back to English. And so now it says, all right, look at the county name. split that based on the presence of a colon, give me back the number 1 element from that, and then take whatever that evaluates to, pass it into the trim function. The trim then will operate on that. And now I've got just the name that I'm after. And so this expression I can use to set the name of the that variable, set the value of that variable. Now, I did this in 2 steps. I could have just left this. I could get rid of this whole line by doing what? If I take what I have highlighted here and delete this whole line, where would I have to put it? Yeah, where I have CO name here. So this just reads the value into CO name, and then I use the value sitting in CO name to adjust it. Doing it in 2 steps, I'm not sure that was any better than doing it in 1. Okay, so now I can just take my yellow arrow and I can drag that back up to where I want to go back to. And I can hit play from here and it should run up until I hit the stop. I should be able to ask it to print coname, and now coname should just be the smaller version. Any questions? There's a list of functions for manipulating strings about as long as your arm. And we're going to get familiar with kind of a core set of them, but that's not the topic for today. We're just trying to get to where we can work with loops. Seems like there was a question back here. No? Okay. So the questioner says trim is just built right into VBA. You don't have to do the little trick to be able to get to the Excel functions, and that's correct. So there is, so trim is actually a part of the VBA language. The VBA language itself is not that big. There's fewer than 200 different statements as part of the language. There's lots of other things we can do, but they're all part of objects or methods of objects. We get a hold of an object, and that object knows how to do things. But the VBA language doesn't really know that much. Trim is one of the things it knows. Split is one of the things it knows. Those are built into the language. Okay, so now I just want to name that newly named sheet this value. How do I do it? Someone help me. Yes, right. I've got a reference to that sheet. What's the name of that sheet? Probably sheet 12 or something. I don't know, sheet 3. So I'm going to change the name, s.name equals what? Coname. And so now if I run that line, I should have that sheet named Gov County, Kansas. Pretty good. So now I'm just giving this function a number. I'm giving it a FIPS number. And then it's going to pull that data in, look at what the name of the spreadsheet is, and then name it. That's great. You know what I should do? I'm going to do one more thing. I'm just going to do a check because depending on what this web query brings back, there could be a hiccup. The server might be overloaded and not send back any data, or the user might put in a code that doesn't really correspond to a particular county. So let me just do some kind of a check that makes sure that this page came back looking like what I think it should look like. And to do that, I'm just going to check to see if this range, A9, if it starts with area colon. Right? That's what I'm expecting it to see, area colon. If that starts with area colon, I'm just going to assume this is a well-formatted page. If not, I'm going to say, put the brakes on, something's gone wrong. So even before I get to this coname part, I'm just going to come up here and say, if, and here's another string manipulation function, I want to look at the left of value of range A9, the leftmost 5 characters. So the left function takes 2 arguments. It takes some string to look at. This is whatever text is in A9 on that sheet that we just created. And I want to know the leftmost 5 characters. This is the first time I think that we've used the if statement. If statements, conditional branching, we'll spend a whole day just on this idea. For now, just kind of come along with me. If that value is different from That's how we say different from in VBA, less than or greater than, so less than greater than symbol. If that's different from area, and case will matter, colon, those are the 5 characters, then stop. I'm not expecting that to be different, but if it is, something's gone wrong. I could be more sophisticated about this. I could say, try it again. If it's still wrong, then an error message to the user. But for right now, I'm just saying, while I'm debugging this code and building it, I'm fine just to have it stop, because whenever I get to the stop keyword, it takes me into break mode and says, here's where I am. Everything's still suspended in memory, kind of lets me snoop around. That's kind of a good place to be. So do we see what we're doing here? This is just a check. I guess we'll say check to be sure the data came back well formatted. Check for well formatted data. Well formatted. And if it's not, if it doesn't look as I expect it to do, then the code will just suspend right here. Otherwise, we'll continue on. Okay. So far, so good. Okay, so now I want to actually take a look at our first loop. And what I'd want to do is I want to delete all of these rows from 1 down here to 18. And there's a couple of ways I can do it. I could actually refer to that range, all the rows from 1 to 18, and just delete them with one statement. And that's probably the right way to do it. But since I'm trying to show you how to use a loop, I'm going to show you a different way to do it. It won't be as efficient, but it'll be a pretty simple example for us to see how the loop works. And this is going to be a loop that we've seen before, but we've never really talked about it in detail, the do loop. The do loop is the most general purpose loop. So I'm going to come in here. I'll do right before my stop. And I will say delete, this is a comment, delete header lines. Okay, so remember do and loop is the control structure for this. Anytime I do a do loop, or any loop for that matter, what's the keyword I should put in here? Do events. And remember, without the do events, if I just did a do and loop, am I brave enough to do that and show you what happens? Well, okay, I'll save. Let me save first. Definitely need to save at this point. I'm going to comment this out. And actually, let me just go ahead and I'm going to build. I'm going to do this in a different sub procedure. So don't do this. Just watch. Sub endless. Do loop. All right, I'm going to run this, F5. All right, it's running. Up here it says it's running, and it doesn't have a whole lot to do, but it's doing that as fast as it can. How fast is it doing it? Control-Shift-Escape. Let's see if we can get to the performance on this. So I've got, this is an i7. How many cores does an i7 have? So it's taken this much. This is running on only one of my cores. So it's not, if this was a single core, single processor machine, this thing would be maxed out at 100%. But this is now, you can see that before this, maybe this wasn't recording, but that's how processor it's using. It looks like 1/8. I mean, it's taken, dominated that particular core. So much so that it's not even refreshing, right? Can you see this kind of grayed out here? I can't the stop because it's so busy doing this loop that it's not taking any time to find out what else I'm trying to do. How am I going to stop this? I'm going to kill Excel. It's my only option. Did someone have some other suggestions? That would stop it too. Yeah, the comment was throw my computer through a window. So let me I'll just come back here to processes. I'll find Excel, and I will end. And I will restart Excel. Show recovered files. Found employment. And let's see, enable content. Alt F11. And back to module 1. Now, with the do events in it, I'll go ahead and run this one. I'm still in an endless loop because I think I already have a name of a worksheet. I'm going to try to name a worksheet the name of a worksheet that already exists. So that should give me an error before I get to my loop. So let me just continue. I'm going to skip over that line and we'll continue. So again, I'm in this endless loop. Let's come back and look at performance. So we can see that it dropped down substantially while I was not running that loop. Now it's back up running it. But now, because it has that events inside the loop that it's running, it should be able to come here and hit pause. It's because every time it gets to do events, the interpreter looks up and it goes, anybody trying to get my attention? And we go, yeah, I'm trying to get your attention. And it says, okay, you're trying to pause? We'll pause. So it's safe. It doesn't add that much into the processing time on a PC, but on a Mac, if you say do events, it really slows down the loop. I'm not sure why that is. There's probably a good reason for that. So definitely when you're debugging, but when you go into production, you may want to take it out. Okay, so now I just want to delete the first line until some condition happens. In fact, I'm going to just continually delete the first line until range A1 equals year. So inside my loop, I'm just going to say s dot rows number 1 dot delete. Now, I don't have a way out of this loop. Would this ever end? Would this be an endless loop? Or So you might think maybe you'll eventually delete all the rows, but that's not what happens. When you delete a row off the worksheet, Excel automatically adds another one into the bottom. And so you're never going to delete them all. So yeah, this is endless, even though I'm doing something here. So I'm going to do this until s.range A1, s.range A1's value is equal to year. Now, this until clause, the thing to realize about the until clause is that the until clause is evaluated at the point that it appears in the loop. So here it's appearing right at the very beginning of the loop. It's going to check, do until this expression equals true. At this point, does this expression equal true? No. And so it's going to keep going in the loop until the condition is true. But the point that I want to make is that at some point I'm going to delete that. Yeah, actually we'll see it. Let me go ahead and I'm going to put a statement in here. I'm just going to print what is in. So we know it doesn't equal year, but I want to see what it is. Debug.print. And I'm going to print whatever it is. Okay, I'm going to come back up to the top of my do loop now, and I'm just going to start to execute this one line at a time. We'll be able to see it. Happen. No, remove all that stuff, I guess. Zoom in a bit. Control home. Okay, so I'm going to execute this one line at a time by pressing F8. Which is the same as debug step into. I think that's what I'm going to do. F8. Debug step into. I've put myself in some condition that it doesn't like. Stand by for just a moment. Sometimes the editing environment, if you've put yourself into break mode, it won't step. So let me just put a stop right here and run to that stop. And now let me see if I can step one at a time, F8. Yeah. That's I think that's a bug. I'm not sure why that is. I'm going to get rid of the stop. Okay, now I should be able to go one line at a time, F8. You'll see it delete this row. And it's going to print, do a debug.print of what is in, hey, where's my immediate window? Oh, it'll do a debug.print of what is in A1. So F8. There's nothing there, so that's kind of boring. So we're deleting these one at a time. Okay, now I'm deleting that line. Now it's going to look what's in A1. There it is. Okay, so we see this going. Go ahead and just kind of go through this till we get closer to the one we're after. Okay, so we just printed download. We've deleted download. Now, okay, at this point, what is the value that's in A1? It's year. Is my exit condition true or false? Exit condition is true. Why am I still in the loop? F8, I'll press F8 again. Yeah, I'm still in that loop. And the answer is that it doesn't really execute until the condition becomes true. It executes until it looks at the condition and it's true. And when does it look at the condition? At the beginning of the loop. So now it's going to come back up here, and now it's going to check that condition. So it's a slight distinction to make, but as soon as that condition becomes true, it's not going to get me out of the loop. It has to get back to the point where it's checking it to be able to get out of the loop. The question here? Oh, never found it. Right, yeah, case sensitive. String. The comment is he put a lowercase y, and so he's never finding a match here. Is there a way to recover, get back that data you deleted? Yeah, and the answer is no. In VBA, once you've executed that line, there's no way to say, I want to go undo it. But fortunately, this thing will put itself right back where it needs to be. So just correct your code, run the procedure again. Maybe go delete the worksheet so you don't have a problem with the name. It'll generate a new worksheet and put you back in good stead. Okay, so now it's checking that. So if I execute this line, F8, it drops me out of the loop. So the thing to realize is that it will execute until it checks that expression and it evaluates the true, and it checks it each time it gets to that point in the loop. Questions? Yeah. Oh, you're talking about these. The question is, hey, you put some spaces right in here. Why did you do that? And the answer is, I did it. It's one of the few good habits I have in life. Why is it a good habit? The answer is that with this loop, it's only got 3 lines in it. I'm probably okay without the spaces here. But when this structure gets longer to where I can't see the do and the loop really clearly close to each other, I want to be able to look straight down from that do and go seeing nothing in the way until I bump into the loop. It makes this structure kind of stand out as, this is a loop. So this is something that is kind of a construct. And we'll do the same thing once we'll start learning other constructs that we want to say, oh, here's where this construct begins, here's where it ends. Everything else is pushed in as a part of it. So yeah, it's not functional, it's just to help the human processor be able to read the code better. And if you ever get a loop that's longer than you can see on one screen at a time, if you don't do that kind of indenting, it's just deadly. Okay. Now, there's another place I can put this clause. I can put this clause at the end. And if I have it at the end, what's the difference? Is there a difference? Well, there must be a difference, but why did I put it at the end if there's no difference? Yeah, that's it. Because remember, this is not gonna end the loop until it gets evaluated. And so when I put this loop at the bottom, the code inside the loop is guaranteed to run once because it never checks until it gets to the bottom of the loop. You might think it's going to run one more time, and that's not the case. Because what line comes exactly after this one in the structure? Yeah, it goes right back up here. And so whether I have it at the loop or the do, there's nothing that executes between when those two evaluations are made. It goes right from one to the other. So it either evaluates here or it evaluates in the next step. The only difference in placing the condition at the end is, are you guaranteed to run the loop once? And so that's kind of an important distinction on the do loop. Questions on that difference? Okay. Another thing that I can do here, I can do while. Do while is just the opposite of do until. Do until does the loop until the condition's true. Do while does the loop while the condition is true, or until it's false. And so it's really just, it's like syntactic. You could do exactly the same thing with until, and then do what? Not that. Just reverse this from true to false. But, so that's your choice. You can put a while or you can do an until. Prefer while. I do until for some reason, but every once in a while makes sense as well. Let me put this back where I really want it, which is at the top. In this case, I wouldn't expect it to make a difference because I am really expecting they have to delete those first 18 lines or 17 lines. Okay, one more thing on the do loop, and that is what if I really need to have this happen immediately as soon as that condition becomes true? There's another way out of this loop. And so I can say, here's the line that could be changing what is in A1. At this point, I can check. I can say if, another if statement, if, and then just repeat that condition. If A1 equals year, then exit do. What the exit do allows me to do is it allows me just to jump right to the loop. It says, I don't care anything else. I don't care what the condition at the top said, do while, do until, whatever, I don't care. Just get me out of here. And so you can put as many of these as you want inside the loop, just looking for different conditions, and when that condition becomes true, get out of the loop. Questions? In the back? Is there a continue, meaning go back to the top of the loop? And the answer is in VBA, there is no structure built in to send you right back to the top of the loop. There's a way to do it. Yeah, I'm not going to show it to you because as soon as I show that to you, it's evil, and you'll think, oh, I can use that in lots of different places. And your life would become miserable. Maybe after I've helped you develop some more good habits, I'll show you that one, which can be used, but there's really kind of some specific places that technique is valid, and it's not yet. Okay, that's the do loop. And so that should get us to the point where we've gotten rid of all the rest of our kind of unwanted data. Oh, we have a little more unwanted data. And that is right down here at the very end. Let me do just like control down arrow. Now, there's kind of a couple other things that are a little bit ugly about this data. Here's like some footnotes. I don't know what happened, but as we look at this data, a bunch of these from 2017, ending in 2017, going all the way back to 2010, all of these numbers were revised. That little footnote says this number was revised. In other words, the Bureau of Labor Statistics at some point in the past reported a different number for this. I don't know. Did they have an intern doing something that did the wrong? I don't know what it was. But they've revised a whole potload of numbers. And that's really kind of ugly for us for two reasons. Well, for one main reason, is that this is no longer a number. This comes in as text. And that %R, that little R footnote we've got rid of. So two things I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of these two footnotes at the bottom, which are always going to be here because it seems like all of the data nationwide was restated for this period. And so we've got some revision, and then we have some data that's given as preliminary. And so I would like to get rid of these two footnotes, and I would like to just change these to change these back into numbers instead of text. Okay. So this, let's take a, in fact, I'm going to record this. I'm going to record myself doing this. Let me come back up to the top, control up arrow. I'm going to be here in A1, and Let me go ahead and record. You probably don't, you can record this if you want, but there's probably not a big reason to record it. Because I'm in break mode, I can't record while I'm in break mode. So let me come here and stop and record. All right, what macro do you want to name it? I'll name it macro 1. That's just fine. I want to see the code that it generates. Now, how am I going to find those last 2 rows? Any thoughts on how I can find the last 2 rows? If you're just in Excel and you want to find the last 2 rows, how are you going to do it? In the back? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. How do I do it? Go down to the first row. So you're saying make a loop. It just keeps looking until I find something. Okay, so that's a VB way to do it. We could do it that way, but there's a kind of a slicker way that I'm headed to. Okay, so if I'm just doing an Excel, I would do control down. So let's record and see what happens if I do control down. So I do control down, and that takes me to the end of the contiguous data. Now, I know about the data that I have here, I'm not going to have any blanks in here. If there's a blank in these years, it would find that blank. But here, the Bureau of Labor Statistics isn't going to send me back data without a year. Here's a number. We're not sure what year it was from, but we're just going to give it to you. So I'm comfortable with that. So now I've found that. I want to take a look at the code that generated. So back to my code, and let me maximize. View my Project Explorer. Now it's generated a new module for me, module 2, and here it is. It's right here, end. End is a method of a range. And so when I selected range, which was A1, it says end, and then I tell it which direction I want to do the end in. And that is, this is Excel down. That says go down. What if I was somewhere and I wanted to go up to contiguous data? Excel up. What if I was somewhere and I wanted to go to the right to the contiguous data? Excel, it's not Excel. It's Excel to right. I don't know why they couldn't use Excel right. It was probably already defined to mean something else, but it's Excel to right, Excel to left, Excel up, Excel down. Okay, so now let me come back to my code. I'm going to come back and delete all the sheets except my list of counties. Delete. Yes, I want to delete them. And I want to reduce the volume. Okay, and Excel down. It's a pretty simple syntax. And actually, let me show you. I'm going to show you something. This is why it's end. Back in the days before the control key was invented. I love this. In the early days of Excel, you didn't hit control down arrow, didn't mean anything. It may actually have been before they invented the control key, but it may not have been. You could do this with a 2 keystroke sequence. You could tap the end key on your keyboard, end. You may notice here, I am now in end mode. I came into end mode here. And then down arrow, a 2 keystroke sequence. And up arrow does the same thing. That's why it's end down. It's like hitting the end key and then whatever the sequence you're after. Okay, so let me come back to my code, module 1. After I've done this, I've deleted all that data. I want to refer to that particular cell. So S dot range A1 dot end. I'm going to tell it I want to go down. And then what do I want to do? Yeah, I don't have to select it. Anytime you record yourself doing this, you're actually selecting the cell, and so it records selecting it. I don't have to select it. This is going to refer to that cell. What cell am I talking about? Whichever one I was on. If I was on A1 and hit control down arrow, that's the cell I'm talking about. If I want to select it, I'll say select. I don't want to select it. I want to delete it. So I'm going to say dot delete. And that will get rid of one of them. I just want to do it twice. Because I've got 2 lines that I want to get rid of off the end. So that'll go to the bottom, take off the bottom one, go to the bottom again, take off the bottom one. And so that will delete those last 2 rows at the end. Okay, next thing to try is I want to get rid of all of those, all the R's. So again, let me run to this point. I shouldn't delete those things. I'm going to go ahead and run. Bring my data back in. So the question over here while it's running.
Do you feel pretty confident that all tens of thousands it all have only two?
The question is, am I really confident there's only 2 footnotes? And the answer is, I'm not all that confident. I'm pretty confident. So if I wasn't confident and it was important, what would I do? I'd probably get down to that data and take a look at it. Does this say %, or does this say the label I'm looking for? If so, delete it. And then if it says something else I'm not expecting, if it's non-numeric, then put myself in that condition. This is something I wasn't expecting. It's not what I was looking for, but it's not numeric. Before just deleting it, I better take a look at it. Okay, I will stop my code. Okay, so now I've got the data here for Gov County, and I'm trying to delete this. Well, again, let me just record myself doing that. So I'll record. I'll press Control H. What am I looking for? I'm looking for %R. What do I want to replace it with? I'll go ahead and match case. Replace it with nothing. My options, I guess I'll go ahead and match case. Not the entire contents of the cell. I'll say replace all. 384, that's great. I'll say OK. I'll close, stop recording, and let's take a look at the code that it generated. Actually, I probably should have warned you. This code is going to be a little bit more complex. You probably will want to, rather than type this, you'll probably want to generate it. So just record yourself doing that Control H, find and replace. And then this is the code. Now, I think we've talked about the cells method, but we've only ever talked about it by telling which cell, right? Cells, open parenthesis, we put the row, comma, column. What cells do you think it's talking about if I don't tell it which row and which column I'm talking about? I haven't told it which one. Which one do you think it means? It means all of them. It's the collection of all the cells. And so that's okay. I just want to make sure I'm talking about the right sheet. And so I'm going to say S dot. So looking at the sheet that I've created, I want to look at all the cells and do this replace. This is the first time I think we've talked about this. This is recorded a really long line. So long it thought, if you print this off, it's not going to print very well. And so it has put the line continuation character here. So if you have an underscore, then that says, hey, that's not really the end of the line, isn't the end of the statement. Just continue this on. I could delete that underscore and bring this all up onto one line, or I can leave it there because it makes it so you can see more of it. I'm going to go ahead and copy that again, and then get rid of the projection as well as the revised. Just change the P to an R, R to a P. Okay, so now we are removing the footnotes. Yes. Whew. Okay. Let's do one more thing. Just because it'll make my data look after I've done all this, it'll look a little bit more easy to read if we kind of squish this data down so that it fits the column widths fit the data. We could record ourselves doing it, but it's pretty simple to do, so let's just take a look at it. S.cells dot entire. Oh, let me do this. Let me do S dot. Here's another kind of interesting thing. S dot used region. Used. Was it used? Used range. Yeah, sorry, it's used range. Used range is the smallest rectangle that contains all the data in the worksheet. So that refers to a particular range. It's the range that has all the data. I want to refer to the entire column of that. So now this is, squish this down as tight as it can go, and it's the full column. Let's say auto fit. And so that will just all the columns on the data. I'm going to choose a different county. I can do Baldwin County, 01003. I'll run this again, and I should get my data then nice and configured. There's Baldwin County. It's brought it in. It looks like it's corrected all of the footnotes. I don't have the data at the bottom, and I've been collapsed into fitting the columns to the data. Okay, questions? Question?
On the Baldwin data, on my very bottom, mine has like kind of like the parentheses are has parentheses with.
So I might have snuck. Do you have two lines here? You have both of them? Well, maybe I'll take a look here at the end of the class, or maybe we can get Parker to come take a look and see if he can see why that's happening. Raise your hand so Parker can see who you are. Okay. We got to get to the other loops. We've only done the do loop, and that one you've seen so far. Okay, so let's do this. That's done a pretty good job of bringing that data in. So I'll go ahead and stop this code. I'll get rid of my stop. Now, the one thing that's a little bit problematic here while I'm running this is that now that I'm setting the name of that worksheet, if I just try to run that again, it's going to have that error because I kind of have two worksheets. So I'd like to have some easy way to be able to get rid of all the worksheets that aren't my count worksheet. So I'm going to create another sub-procedure just called delete sheets. All right, we're going to talk again about the for each loop. So the for each loop is probably the most difficult one to grasp when you're just starting out. So the do loop itself is just so simple. Do, start of the loop, loop, end of the loop. The for each loop requires a variable to be able to control it. So let me declare a variable called WS and it has to be an object variable. So I'll make it a worksheet variable. I could say object here, but now when I declare this as worksheet instead of as object, I'll get my IntelliSense help while I'm programming. That's good. So let's go ahead and set up the loop. For each WS in this workbook dot worksheets. Next, that's the syntax of the for each loop. I got to say for each, that starts the loop. It ends the loop with next. After my for each, I have to give it a control variable. It has to be an object variable. It can also be variant type because invariant can behave like an object, but it's got to be an object variable. In, and then some collection of objects. And then what's going to happen is that WS, as an object variable, will get connected onto, in turn, each item in this. So let me just print off the names of the words to see it functioning. Debug.print ws.name. Just like up here, I was binding S onto the worksheet that I added. It connected up that object variable to a particular worksheet. The same thing happens down here. Each time through the loop, WS gets attached onto a different element in this collection. So the first time through, this will be connected onto the first element in the collection. It'll be my worksheet called counties. And so I'll print the name. This should just print off the names of the counties. I'm sorry, the names of my worksheets, not the names of the counties, the names of the worksheets. delete sheets. So there it is. I've got a worksheet called Counties, one called Gov Kansas, one called Baldwin County, or Gov County, one called Baldwin County. So now what I want to do is I want to delete all of these except for which one? Yeah, so I'm going to say, listen, if the name is different than counties, then what? What do I do? What do I put here? I want to delete the worksheet. How do I do it? Right. WS is looking at one of these worksheets right now. Dot delete. And so WS gets bound onto a worksheet. I'm checking to see if the name is different than counties. If it's different than counties, I want to delete it. This should now get rid of anything that I've written so far. Any of these worksheets that I've created, you've got to be careful here because, someone created some other worksheet they wanted to save. This is just going to delete it. Maybe you should have a warning here. Oh, one more thing. Every time I delete a worksheet, what does Excel do? Puts up a warning. Oh my gosh, you're deleting a worksheet. You can't undo this. Are you sure you want to do that? It will happen when you do it through VBA, unless you tell it to suppress alerts. You got to tell the application not to display any alerts. Here's how. So let's do that first. Application. Dot display alerts equals false. Display alerts is a property of the application object. What's the application object? It's Excel. So I'm setting a property about Excel itself, telling it how to behave. And that is, look, when I do something, I know what I'm doing. Don't display it. Okay, so now if I run this, it should just delete those sheets. Yeah, I'm down just to counties. Feels pretty good. So that's another look at the for each loop. If there was some reason I was partway through this and I decided, you know what, I'm done, I could say exit for, just like I could say exit do. So there's an exit for analogous to exit do. No real reason to do it in this example. All right, there's another loop now that I don't think we've looked at. We've seen both of these before. There's another one. And I'm going to do this one actually in my get data. So you'll notice right now, this is just bringing in one county. Let's say I wanted to bring in a bunch of counties from Utah. Let me find Utah. Control F, Utah, match case, Utah, find next. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to do Beaver County, Box Elder County, and Cache County. I'm going to do all three of these. So that was 49001. And I'm going to do 4900, was it 135? Oh, that's interesting. All of these end in odd numbers. Oh, except 0. What is 0, odd or even? A little quiz, a little math quiz. A little number theory quiz. Odd or 0, odd or even? It's neither one. Not even. It's neither one. I don't know why that's important. I missed that on a quiz once, but anyway. Okay. Now, okay, so here, folks, anytime you see yourself having multiple statements in a row that are mostly the same with some difference, that should be a clue to yourself. Maybe I should do this with a loop. And so, if I'm going to do this with a loop, I just need some expression here that I can figure out the right number to give it. And I'll have only one statement here with a loop built around it. And if I was only doing it 3 times, truth is I'd probably just do it just like this. But if I was doing it 30 times, I want to build a loop to be able to do it. Okay, so this next kind of loop is just called the for loop. And like the for each loop, it takes a control variable. But for the for loop, the control variable has to be an integer. It might be able to be a floating point number. It's got to be a number. And there's no reason for it to be anything but an integer. It might work if it's not an integer. Anyway, dim, just call it x as an integer. It could be a byte, which is an integer type. It could be integer, which is integer, or it could be long. Here's the structure. 4x equals 1, 2, 20. Next. Debug.print x. The magical thing here, just like the control variable in the for each loop, control variable does something that the loop is automatically doing something with a control variable, right? It's binding it onto a different object. In the for next loop, the control variable gets counted up by 1 each time. So if I run this, it should just print 1 through 20 in the code window. There it is. It doesn't have to start at 1. If I'm interested in the guys from Utah, I could do 2825 all the way to 2853. So start at 2825 and go to 2853. And great, it starts at that number and it goes by, adds by 1 each time. By the way, if I want to go by something different, I can say step 10. And now it'll count by tens. So this is what it adds each time it gets to next. It's going to add that to the control variable. So now it did it by 20, 35, 45. 45. Oh, I must did it twice. 25, 35, 45. Did it twice. And so if I don't include that clause, it's the same as saying step 1. So what expression would I put here if I wanted to print these numbers instead of x? Worksheet, or this workbook, dot worksheets. What's my sheet called? Counties. Dot cells. Whew. Row number X, column number 1. Dot value. Now this should print the numbers I'm actually after, VALUE. We're stepping by 1. We're running this code. And so those are now my county identifiers. 49, by the way, means the state of Utah, and then they're numbered within the state of Utah. And so now, if instead of printing that, I just called import county data on that expression, then it should go and get those sheets. Maybe before I run this, I will delete any existing sheets I have. So I'll call delete sheets. Did I call that just delete underscore sheets? Is that what it was? Yeah. So now when I run this data, I'm going to say, look, get rid of whatever I had before, and now pull in the data from Utah, and just by setting it the right value each time. That's the for next loop. Let me go ahead and run that, and that'll be it for today. It's where we're seeing this and can see it run. Oh, I am going to go ahead and put a do events in. The for next loop is much less likely to end up endless than a do loop, but it doesn't hurt to have it there. And the do events actually also causes a screen refresh each time it happens. So we should be able to see this go. Need a space there. So as it brings this in, it should bring in whatever that first one, Box Elder County, or Beaver County, then it'll bring in Box Elder County, and so forth. Any questions? 3 main kinds of loops: do loop, the for each loop, and the for next loop. We have homework due tonight. We got a project due Monday night. I am out of town between now and Saturday. So reach out to TAs if you need help on the project or on the assignment. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed.